Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and it is time for Friday Reads. It hasn't really been a full week since the last one happened on a Sunday, but it's still Friday. I'm trying to get back on track on the regular schedule here. And I do have a few books to talk about and a couple other things. So I hope you've been having a good week. Ours was mostly good. It started out a little rocky and then it improved. I'm trying to think if it's been long enough for this story to be funny yet or not, or if it's still just kind of harrowing. But I don't know. To make a long story short, as best I can, we got a new car. Not a new car. It's a used car, but a newer used car. It's a 2021. But anyway, our car that we've been driving was suffering from some issues of aging that was, something expensive was looming. So we decided it was time. And the main factor is the air conditioner was just crap. And it is, it's hot here like 10 months a year. So we just couldn't do it anymore. So we traded it in and we tried something new. A couple of things that are new. First of all, we used Carvana, which we're not going to do that again. That's a whole other story. But also we've gone for an electric, and that's new territory. But the story is that we got this car, and we thought we had researched the whole issue about the charging and the recharging of the car, and that we looked at this app and it shows there's all these locations and said, okay, great, no problem. Well, we didn't understand about the map was showing us things that were not actually public locations, like plugs in apartment complexes, and also it was not differentiating that some of the plugs were not compatible because we did not get a Tesla. It's a Hyundai, and a lot of the charging stations are operated by Tesla, and you can't use them unless you have a certain adapter, and we don't know what that was. So anyway, the whole issue of just getting home from a point a couple hours away would not have been an issue if they had sold the car to us fully charged, but they gave it to us half charged, and we had an extremely hard time. Well, actually, we never did we should have found a compatible charging place while still in the city of San Antonio and not waited until we were out in the middle of nowhere, which is everything between San Antonio and Corpus. That's the whole thing. You leave one city, you're in the middle of nowhere till you get to the next city, and the charge was not going to make it. So we ended up stranded in this little town that's about 40 minutes from our house, and there was nowhere to charge. No one sold the adapters, and we ended up having to get the car towed the last 40 miles to the house so that we could recharge it. So Monday sucked really bad, and it took me a couple days to just decompress from that adventure before I could enjoy the car, which I actually really do like the car. So the next segment of my weekly review is television shows. We haven't really been watching a show. We have tried and failed on a couple that just didn't really catch our attention. We have been watching some episodes of a comedy show called, we keep forgetting the name of it, but I think it's called I Think You Should Leave. I Think You Should Leave Now. I'll put it up here on the screen. It's a sketch show. It's like short, fast, offbeat sketches. If one of them's not so funny, then the next one is, and it's hard to explain. It's very strange. It moves along very quickly. So we did watch The Zone of Interest, which was absolutely a phenomenal movie, and I highly recommend it. And right now we're in the middle of American Fiction. We watched half of it last night. We're going to finish it tonight, and that's also really, really good. Which brings us to the main point of this video, which is the week in reading. So I do have 2 books that I finished, and then I'm in the middle of a couple other books. So let's talk about those. It is so loud. Anyway, I know I talk about this air conditioner every time, and I probably will until about, Christmas, when it cools down a little bit. Anyway, all right, let's talk about books. All right, so I did finish, oops. That was my bookmark. Now, I stuck that in there to remind myself to brag about finishing the adult reading challenge at the public library, and I got my little finished bookmark. All these beads represent finishing the sections of their Monopoly board, so nerd credit. So I did read The Safekeep by Yael van der Woulden. I think I had just read the first portion of this the last time I was talking about this, and I kind of described the atmosphere. And that atmosphere in the first half of this book is what I liked the best about this book. This is a debut novel, and that's quite an accomplishment for your first novel to land on the Booker list. So that is an impressive feat in and of itself. And overall, now that I've read the whole book, I will say I really did like this book. I thought it was quite good. Maybe it didn't blow me away. I'll get to it in a minute. Like what I thought was the weakness in this book that kind of steps me back from being just overwhelmed with wonderment at it. But I thought it really was quite good. I described the atmosphere a little bit in my last video about how there's a woman named Isabel who's about 30 years old, and she's living in a large family home in the Dutch countryside in 1961. She is the last remaining child to still live in this house in the family. She has two brothers, one slightly older, one slightly younger, and their parents are deceased. So the family moved into this house during World War II. Their uncle bought it for them and their mother as a safer place to live outside of Amsterdam, and their father had already passed away. And so they moved there, and then they grew up. The brothers moved out, but Isabel stayed on and nursed her mother through her final illness. And Isabel is a very strange character. I'm going to put it down. A difficult character, and a very interesting character construction. She's a very rigid person of very particular habits, almost rituals. She takes refuge in this house. She takes solace in this house. Sometimes she feels burdened by this house. Or she doesn't really feel confined. Her brothers look at her and see her as a confined and limited person and ask her, why don't you leave? You don't have to stay there. But to her, it is a safekeep. It's a retreat, and she feels responsible for maintaining it. She has all these inventory lists of everything in the house, and she's paranoid that housekeepers are stealing things. She's gone through a bunch of them, which probably isn't about the imaginary stealing. It's probably more about not being able to deal with her prickly personality. She's really uncomfortable in any kind of social situation. She's super uncomfortable at any thoughts or hints of people having a romantic or a sex life. She's just very, very stuck in her head and in her rituals, and it does not do well with humans. So into this scenario comes Eva, Lewis's most recent girlfriend, and Lewis drops her off and says, Eva, I guess she was living with him, and now he has to go on a business trip for a month, and she doesn't have anywhere else to stay, so guess what? She's staying with you. Isabel's not happy about it. Eva, she talks, and she flits, and she's lively, and she asks questions, and she tries to make overtures of friendship, and Isabel's having none of it. And they're stuck together in the house. The house takes on a personality of its own, and it feels like Yael van der Woulden has been reading lots of Sarah Waters novels, because I was getting hints of Fingersmith. I was getting hints of The Paying Guests. Just even with, houses play a big role in a lot of her books as well. What's that other one about the kind of sort of haunted house? It's not The Little Friend. That's a Donna Tartt book. The Little Stranger? I'll double check my shelves. That's as far as I want to go with what happens in the plot. And a lot has been talked about how this has to do with post-war themes and traumas and the way people have dealt and not dealt with things in that period. And that is a big, important part of the book. The pears are important too. Those juicy, sexy pears come into play more than once. And it's a very sensuous book. What else can I tell you without it being spoilers? The book is divided into 3 parts. So the first part is what I described right now and previously. The second part is a big shift, and it's very important. And It's important in plot, it's important in character, and that's all I can say about it. And then there's a third part. That's where my problem lies of why I like this book, but I don't 100% love this book, because I don't like the way it concludes. I feel like we get to the third part, and there's some things that there's an aftermath to the second part that sort of, has to happen. And then it keeps going past where I think the plot should end. And I have heard other people mention this as well, and I agree with those people. And then I've heard people who really love the ending. And I guess I disagree with those people. So it goes up, there's a place where I feel like it should end, but then there's more, and I wish it wasn't there. That's all I can tell you without spoiling it. But I would not tell you to skip it or pass over it, because I really did enjoy it. I was very caught up in what was going to happen. I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I had a theory, and some of it was right, but I really wasn't sure what would happen with these characters. In what ways would they grow or change? What was everybody's thoughts and agendas? There were some side characters that I wanted to know more about. There was a lot in the stew, and I liked how it was brewed very subtly most of the book. I liked the tension, I liked the nuances, and then it got a little too something at the end that I can't get into. So, but overall, I do give it a positive review. I understand why it was selected for the list. We'll see how far it goes, but I enjoyed reading it. Ta-da! And then the next book that I finished was Lizzie, Bright, and the Buckminster Boy. And I read this with Michael Clark, kind of an ongoing project of reading young adult and middle grade fiction together. And this was a first time read for me. I think it was a reread for him. And we haven't really finished our discussion. This is about the incident of what happened with Malaga Island in the state of Maine in 1912. And if you haven't heard of that, or you didn't read This Other Eden by Paul Harding last year, it is about an actual incident that happened in the United States. There was an island off the coast of Maine, off the coast of a small town called Phippsburg. And for generations, there were people living on this island. They didn't actually own any property, but they owned their own livelihoods. They had built their own homes, and they were people that were descendants of enslaved people and other people. At the time that the people were evicted from the island, there were about 50 of them: Portuguese, Irish, Scottish, African American, Native American, and others not accepted in Phippsburg for whatever reason. And they were fishermen, they were lobster, what do you call a person who, I don't know, is there a word for like lobster gatherers? I don't know. But anyway, they lived off the land, they lived off the water. But the residents of the town and the state of Maine decided that this looked like an ideal commercial property, a tourist property, and so they set about with a plan to evict these people. But nobody wanted to take responsibility for them in their tax rolls, or to support them once they were thrown out of their homes. So that's what actually happened. That's not a spoiler of any kind of plot. That's just what happened in history. The story, this particular story, is about a young boy named Turner who moves as a newcomer to the town as a 13-year-old white boy in the town whose father is the new minister. So it's a coming of age story and a coming aware story. And he makes friends with Lizzie, a black girl that lives on the island. They become very close friends. And so he has a front row seat to what happens. And that's all I'm going to say about it, because we're not finished talking about it. But I thought that the character development in this book was much more engaging than in This Other Eden. The vantage point of the young boy coming to town and not really knowing what the situation is and learning about it firsthand, and learning that he has to form his own interpretation of what is right and wrong, and being exposed to his hypocrisy that people hide behind in the name of progress or decency or Christian values. That a lot of people can talk the talk and say the right words that he's been grown up hearing and not be a good person. So all those kind of things happening. It was just really good. And I can't talk about the last part of the book or the ending, because we haven't discussed it yet. But I found it very emotional, very compelling. And then what I am currently reading, I am getting near the end of Thunderclap, my nonfiction book of the month, and I am really enjoying this. I never thought I wanted to know all this about Dutch art, but as it turns out, I guess I do. I have about 50 pages left. Look where I am right now. Here it is. Whoops. Here it is, the goldfinch. And so I will probably be able to talk more about this next week, so I will be done, and I'll have some final thoughts about the whole thing. And then the other book that I'm reading right now that I'll finish up this weekend, you would think that I would have reached for one of the other Booker titles that I have sitting around, or maybe the Women in Translation books I have sitting around, or something on my cart that I've been talking about, but you would be wrong, because it's just a book from the library called The Other Valley by Scott Alexander Howard. And it's not completely random, because I have checked it out a couple of times and didn't get to it. And it's a speculative fiction book, and every so often, you know, it rises up that I've got to read. I've either got to read something with some murder in it or something weird and speculative. You know, every month the pendulum swings around and hits me right there. So this is a speculative fiction book. It's a debut novel. The author, it says he lives in Vancouver, British Columbia. He has a doctorate in philosophy from the University of Toronto. This book is, it's not overtly set in Canada, but everyone has French names, and the people and the buildings and everything, there's a lot of French in the book. So, but it's set in a place that doesn't exist. In the world of this book, everyone that we are learning about lives in a valley. And then there's a valley to the east and a valley to the west. And if you go one direction, it's where you are and everybody there, but 20 years in the past. And if you go the other direction, it's 20 years in the future. You can't just do that, though, because the borders are heavily guarded, and the only way you can cross over into the other valleys is by petitioning this group that will hear your case and your reasons. Occasionally people do petition to go 20 years in the past, for example, to see a loved one that has died and they can't process their grief, and they're allowed to go. They're escorted, they're masked, and their identity's hidden so that they can't accidentally affect the course of what is supposed to happen. Likewise, occasionally someone is allowed to glimpse somebody in the future. Maybe there's one situation in the book where someone is going to be dying and they want to see their grandchild that's about to be born, but they're not going to live long enough, and so they go there and they can see that person as a young adult. But in general, you're not supposed to talk about it. You're not supposed to joke about it. Everyone's just kind of aware. And if you live in one of the other valleys, everyone, wherever you're at, you feel like that's the present, and there's always a past and a future valley on either side of you, and it ripples out into infinity. So that's the setup. So the world building is very interesting. The way the book begins is kind of tropey, because it starts out with a group of teenagers that are 16 that are about to apply for their adult jobs. So this whole idea of you get to a certain age and then you get assigned your role. I mean, how many books has that been? It's in fantasy books, it's in dystopian books, it's in science fiction books. So that's what's going on. They're 16 and they're all talking about what are they going to do. Their parents want them to do one thing, maybe they want to do something else. And then there's this one special job, of course, that's very rare, that our main character, Odile, is going to apply for. And that's to be on the panel of people who get to decide who crosses the borders. Other people are applying for less, rarefied jobs in the community. So it has this very young adult feel at the beginning. It's these teenagers who likes who kind of stuff, and then their job tensions. And then an unusual situation pops up because our main character, Odile, glimpses some visitors from the future, and she kind of recognizes one of them. And then we eventually, now I'm in the middle of the book, and there's a time jump to when she's further on in her adulthood. So we have some time travel issues about whether or not what would happen that would affect outcomes, and whether or not there's ever a justification for that. And then we have some I have the question, it hasn't really been brought up, but I have the question from reading speculative fiction is there something unknown about this? Is she, the way she understands how this works, is there like a secret in the background? We don't know yet. So it's pretty good. It's pretty intriguing and entertaining. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how I feel about it when I get to the end. So that's where I'm at. Once I finish this, I really do plan to pick up probably one of the Booker titles and a Women in Translation book. I'm going to reschedule my previously mentioned reading of Claudia Piñera up to the future because there's something coming up that I'm going to save it for. But I do have a couple others to choose from for Women in Translation, and so that's what I'm going to do. So let me know what you've been reading, what you're going to do this weekend, all the good stuff. I'm going to wrap it up for now, but I'll be back on Tuesday with a tag about phenomenal women writers, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.